Well, confirmation today, as you've been seeing our unemployment rate higher than it's ever been today. Unemployment increased by 0.5% to 34.9%. You know, of course, how tough it is for people to find work, how slow the economy is. We have a youth unemployment rate, which is much, much higher than that. Zwelinzima Vavi is the General Secretary of the South African Federation of Trade Unions. Mr. Vavi, good afternoon to you. This is proof again. We don't need more proof. We know already that we have a major problem. If we don't solve this, we're not going to solve anything.
And unfortunately, we have not solved it in 27 years of democracy. In fact, if you look at the statistics now, not just because we are in the middle of a major pandemic, coronavirus, but even before we were hit by the coronavirus, we were already talking about figures that are totally presenting a catastrophe for our country. And yet we still have our government refusing to change tack in terms of its economic programs, and is still hell-bent on implementing the austerity program, cutting most of the basic services and making the situation of the poor even worse, putting the economy in a total stagnation and resulting into just reproduction of this unemployment, poverty and inequality. It's a very sad situation. We've repeatedly warned that this represents a ticking time bomb for our country. We saw a window of that in July this year, and we don't want that to continue any further. And that's why we here as Saftu in the Central Committee, and we're going to have to debate this. And we, in fact, our recommendation coming to the Central Committee is that 2022 must be the year of the working class and the poor, the year of unity, the year of mass action, mass mobilization to force the government to change its economic programs and embrace a more developmental path that will ensure redistribution of wealth, and that the economy must grow through redistribution of wealth.
So, I mean, one of the issues, and I mean, you and I have had this conversation many times. We've all, as South Africans, had this conversation many times about unemployment. I sometimes think the real problem is that we can't agree on what to do. You talk about one way, going in one sort of economic direction. Other people want to go in other ways. Is maybe our problem that we just can't agree?
The other way is reproducing the unemployment, poverty and inequality. The other way has created the mess we are finding ourselves in today. And we've repeatedly been saying this, David, that you cannot, from a country with a background of over 300 years of colonialization and 40 years of apartheid, that have put the black majority in doldrums in the bottom of the food chain, and suddenly you want to implement programs that are currently perhaps the mainstay of the Western Europe and America. And when at the beginning, those countries never implemented programs like we've tried here, the neoliberal programs. And that's the fundamental issue that we have been raising unsuccessfully so far. We have a problem. And the problem is that we have a government that is more loyal to the interest of the haves, and which is hell-bent on sidelining the interest of the have-nots. We have the government that is more loyal to the class that owns the means of production, and not loyal to the labor movement and to the labor force in our country. And it is refusing to listen to alternative to the policies that it has enslaved itself to. And that's why we continue to see unemployment growing and black people becoming the face of that unemployment.
I must ask you, it's related, it's not directly related, but it is directly related about vaccinations, Mr. Vavi, and we've seen the conversation around mandatory vaccinations beginning to come through. You mentioned the pandemic at the beginning. We know that it's had an impact, but it's certainly not the root cause of the unemployment that we have. But to put it all another way, if we don't deal with the pandemic, we're not going to increase the number of jobs in the formal sector or the informal sector. Saftu said yesterday, for the first time, it supports mandatory vaccinations. We're seeing different unions. Producer, I think, as well, supports mandatory vaccinations. I know you as Saftu, if I remember correctly, you certainly support vaccinations. You encourage vaccinations. Where do you stand on this conversation around vaccine mandates?
We are right as we speak in that discussion. Our Central Committee is going to deal with that issue specifically, and we will hear tomorrow what these 300 shop stewards gathering here in the Central Committee are going to say about that matter. We will have a press conference on Thursday, 11 o'clock, to announce our position on vaccine mandate, as well as the response to the crisis that is unfolding of unemployment, poverty, and inequalities.
Am I right as a union federation that you do support vaccinations? I won't push you on mandatory vaccinations. I will wait for Thursday. But on vaccinations, you support them?
No, absolutely. We have no doubt, and that's the point that we're making to our members. There is no debate about the efficacy of the vaccines. They work. And we have been encouraging workers to be vaccinated. We have been pushing very hard in our structures that there is no alternative to vaccination. The issue that we are debating is whether that should be made compulsory in the workplace and what will be the consequences of a mandatory vaccine program. And that's what we are currently debating. So we'll come back to you on Thursday about that.
Zwelinzima Vavi, I appreciate the time. We've put it in our diaries, 11 o'clock Thursday morning. Saftu, press conference. Will they back mandatory vaccinations? Will they join Saftu and Producer? We'll find out then. Zwelinzima Vavi, as you know, the General Secretary of the South African Federation of Trade Unions. Mr. Vavi, thank you very much indeed.